the May 20th, 2013 regular meeting of the Sewer Authority Board of Directors is called to order. Roll call, please.
Director Patridge?
Here.
Director Alfano?
Here.
Chair Warren?
Present.
Director Harvey?
Here.
Director Boyd?
Here.
Director Lohman?
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comment or communication for items not on the agenda. I have one. I didn't have time to print the specific information, so the best I can do is from memory. Now and then on the coast side, we hear complaints about sewer service charges. Some people think they're high. I heard a radio report a few days ago, so I did a Google search on San Carlos. Their current rates are about double GSDs, so they're noticeably higher than Half Moon Bay's, and they're higher than Montera's. And they're going to do a 25% increase, and then a 20% increase, and then a 10% increase, so that when they get done at the end of 3 years, their rates are going to be significantly over $1,000 a year. And we're just charging into a national marine sanctuary. We have significant high standards to meet, and yet we still do it for a fraction of the price of many other agencies in the county. So,
Yes.
Yes. Okay, item 3A, special order that I assume I'm supposed to sign on the
Please do.
dotted lines here.
Please do.
If I take it all the way out, are we going to be able to get it back in?
Can we get it
Yeah.
back in? Mr. Chair, members of the board, we have two anniversaries to announce today. George Long, who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight, has been an operator here for 25 years. And Tony Pullen, the technical services supervisor, has been here 30 years. I don't know how old he was when he started, but somehow they let us work him at that time. But Tony's been here 30 years, and you know, he's just getting better every day. So I wanted to recognize the two of them and thank Tony personally, and then we'll thank George. We'll have we'll present it to him at lunch one of these days and embarrass him fully then.
I think it's going to take a staff member to get this back in here.
Well, while Leonard's signing, I'd like to thank Tony again for helping the high school kids through another sewer tour with all the kids. They always love that. It's one of the highlights of the year, interestingly enough.
That's great.
They all super enjoy coming out here and for all your guys' time, taking care of them out here for a couple hours.
Listen,
Sorry, well, you can take it over, so we're running behind schedule here. Why don't we? Do we have a? Okay. Do we have a camera?
30 years.
He was a baby when he started.
Started with
All right. Okay. Act like this is the biggest thing that's happening all afternoon. Great, thank you. We'll have it up on the web. Thank you.
There's something in the air here. It's like a fountain of youth.
It must be the.
It doesn't work.
And so you will present this to...
Yeah, we'll give it to George at lunch. We'll find some, give a cake or something, and we'll go. Thank you. Thank you for signing it.
Okay, item 4, consent agenda. have not had time to review that myself, so I think I'm probably gonna abstain. Do we have a motion, anything to be held for discussion, or else a motion?
Pull for it.
I didn't hear that.
Then pull for F.
For F. That's true, I did wanna hold that one for discussion. Thank you. Anything else?
So that was after we're holding?
Yeah,
Yes.
for F.
Okay, good.
The reason I forgot is I'm surprised that it's on the consent agenda.
Yeah.
Anything else to be held, or else a motion to approve
I
items?
make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through E.
Is there a second?
Second?
I think that goes to Rick. Those in favor say aye.
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 Actually, I'm not gonna say aye, I'm gonna abstain because I've not reviewed enough of it in detail. So that's 701. Okay, item 5, old business, review of previous SAM board authorization to general. What?
For F.
Oh,
Well,
sorry.
I thought this going on the end.
Yeah, I'm a little bit out of it for certain reasons. Okay, Naomi, do you want to go over why you wanted to discuss it?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I thought it was really good that we were refunding the different agencies. However, I have some questions in regards to the return of cash amounts to the member agencies, like the capital collections, capital funds. So I'm not sure what items are really being refunded. And then the wet weather flow monitoring, the 14070, since we didn't participate, I didn't know how we were getting 14070. I know we put money inside. I guess my question is, it's just like the Granada Force Main, 6,100, you know, $360,000. Was this actually budgeted for at any other prior board meeting, and how were the amounts determined? Because there's nothing here to compare or to say where these amounts came from. It would have been good to have something that said the project was this amount, Half Moon Bay share, El Granada share, Montero share, and this is how we got these figures. So you know, not being on the board, it was difficult for me to follow how we got the amount.
Yeah, you go through it, Director.
Interestingly enough, in slightly different words, I wanted to hold it for discussion for the same essential reason, that there's just not enough backup here to indicate how this was computed, because some of these are based on plant ownership percentage, some of them are based on flow percentage, some of them are based on collection system hours percentage, and there's nothing here to reassure the directors that all of this was computed correctly based on the appropriate percentage for each component. So I would suggest that we table this to the next meeting and ask for significant detail showing how the numbers were computed.
Can we give the general manager a chance to make a comment or
Sure.
respond?
Yes, Mr. Manager.
Well, let me, going through this, if you look at the top line, the cash, the capital, they call it capital reserve, that shouldn't be, it's the emergency reserve is 1.25 million. The 2-month reserve is calculated from our projected revenues at essentially $648,000. The capital collections fund I speak to in the back, we have never looked at that fund for reserves. I addressed it at the back of the calendar item, saying that we haven't, the managers and I have been talking about a new collections contract, and so that money that was put away for collection vehicles is still on the books. The WWFMP, this is money that is left over from Granada and isn't left over. It's currently, the WWFMP is not closed out yet, so that $14,000 is from the two participating agencies. The Granada Force Main, that's the remaining estimated cost of the Granada Force Main, which was approved by the board a little over a year ago.
Could you elaborate on specifically what you're referring to on that?
The Granada Force Main was being done in 2 stages. We did the repair of the main from Portola Pump Station across Coronado, and now we're in the process of putting in bypass stations and air valves at 4 locations along the pipeline. So it was done in 2 pieces. One, which was an essentially emergency repair of that piece of pipe, and the other one is to put in the bypass ports so we can inspect them. The biosolid study is currently funded this year in the capital plan, and it's in this year's capital plan for action. So what's left after those are removed from our existing bank accounts, this is what's left over. I'll be happy to get you an accounting in greater detail. That's not a problem. I thought this would be enough to move it forward, but obviously this will get you more detail. Let me say the capitals, the collection capital could be more difficult because of the percentages on that change from year to year, and that's would you like a computation of the investment in the collections capital for the next meeting as well?
I
Do
don't
you
understand.
want to break down the collections capital, since I currently do not have it scheduled to be returned to you until we evaluate the collections contract with the managers and then bring that to you for action.
Well, let me look to the board. Are we okay with deferring the collections part of this until after the contracts are reviewed?
You're talking about
The excess collection capital,
And because-
instead of refunding that right away.
because we as a board don't know if we're going to do our own collections or if we're going to continue doing it at SAM, is that correct?
It's in discussion.
It's
I'm
in
not
discussion?
all that clear on exactly what the managers are discussing on that one.
Well, each agency can call their own shot.
Yeah.
And right now, the managers are all in discussion about mutual interest and whether or not it's.
They
gonna-
want to go
yeah.
outside, yeah.
I think, from what I understand, the pendulum has swung a couple of times now.
Okay.
Where it's like, seems like a good idea, maybe, oh, here's some information, oh, wait, so I was happy to let them sort it out.
The last pendulum swing was that it would be it'd be less expensive to have Sam do it. That was the last swing.
And just to relate it to the capital item, one of the thoughts was that we go and get a bigger truck at the tune of about $250,000. So this item may not be as big as it looks at this point. You know, always get a bigger truck. You can always do it better with a bigger truck. Okay, I'll bring this back with.
But yeah, let me be really clear on what it is that I'm looking for. For each component of the excess money to be returned, I want to see what the sources of that money were and which of the 3 possible percentage formula, that might be the word I was looking for. Now, which of the 3 possible percentage formulas was used for computing that particular component? And in some of the cases, it gets a bit more difficult because, and I can't off the top of my head tell you which things this was, but there was at least one project where Half Moon Bay had contributed money to it. All 3 agencies had contributed money, And then at a certain point, Half Moon Bay said, well, we don't really wanna pay for that, or at least we don't wanna pay for it now, and so they stopped contributing, but then the agency went ahead and did part of the project with the money that was available. And so accounting for that fund has to be done very carefully, and I hope that accounting staff remembers which thing I'm talking about, because I don't. Maybe Scott does. Do you remember which project we did where Half Moon Bay stopped funding partway through? It was a multi-year collection of the money.
Is it dinner time?
Is it the wet weather flood project?
I don't think so.
Is it dinner time?
I can ask GSD's general manager if he remembers. But, you know, that's basically, well, it may turn up once staff goes through and looks at the source of each particular section of the money. So we will assume that we'll see this again next month.
Oh, bring it back. No problem.
Thank you.
All right. Item 5A, review of previous SAM board authorization to general manager to sign agreement with its personnel. I guess that's some sort of honey name. For SAM personnel, administrative, safety, and CalPERS policy updates.
I'm bringing this back to the board. Director Alfano raised some questions about it, and you were involved in that, Mr. Chair, and I wanted to bring it back for the board's consideration. I did, based on the board's last action, I did sign the contract. We sent it to the contractor. We have subsequently asked her to hold it and not do any work on it. She's assured us that she hasn't done any work on it, but it's brought back with all the detail I can put together here for the board's discussion and action. A couple of things. The packet in here from its personnel was the original one we got. I have the signed document here where we made the corrections to the not to exceed $25,000 that the board asked for at the last meeting, and I'm happy to share that with you. We have the earlier copy of this from the last board meeting. I didn't put in the signed copy of it.
Now, the original reason that I suggested to the manager that we look at this again is because I had heard from Director Alfano that we might be able to get it done for a lot less, but then now I get the idea that after even more investigation, he's found out that that might not really be the case, and the other costs might be close. So somehow between Director Alfano and the general manager, I need to hear exactly where we are with this.
Steve, if you want, you can pass those copies out put together. Well, I think the day or two after our meeting, I was still a little, baffled by the $25,000 to update the policies. And obviously most companies, HR policies are the most critical. I happened to bump into an attorney in town that does labor work for companies, especially HR work, and I was talking to him, and I was asking him about if they came into a company, what would they charge? And he said, to do update HR policies for a small agency is around, give or take, around $5,000. So then anyhow, that got me going, and I called Steve up and said, gee, are we really doing this the right way? And the concern I think Steve had is that there's more than just HR policies. So he recommended that I come in here and take a look at the binders and see what's in there before we go any further. So I think that day or the next day I stopped by. He had the binders out on the table and I went through them. And it became pretty clear that they break down into roughly, say, 6 categories, which is HR, safety, union, finance, general policies, and resolutions. The binders aren't totally organized that way, but I kind of think that would be the logical way to have your binders organized. Clearly, HR needs a professional to come in and get you up to date on your HR policies. I feel it makes more sense to have somebody who's an HR attorney than to have us have somebody who's not, and then have to go get an attorney later and have them come back and review them. And again, I've double checked, and it seems like roughly around 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. It's probably a reasonable number to update HR policies. Safety is a big deal with Sam, and again, I think in terms of where do you have your legal liabilities, I think HR and safety are the first two that you really want to be up to date with. Jeanette was there with me when I was looking through these. Her comment, and I thought it made sense, was we should look to our insurer to say to them, if you had a consultant, who would you recommend to come in and review our safety policies and make sure they're correct and up to date? Which, again, I think that makes a lot of sense. The union should be fairly simple. I mean, that pretty much should be our union agreement, and then whatever side letters we've got in the past. Finance is something that we generally create of how do we handle petty cash, how do we handle checks, bank statements, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's something that staff could update, and then my recommendation would be to say have Parsons go through and see if they agree with that. And we could even have our auditors go through and see if they're in agreement also. You get a cover letter from both of them, I think you're in pretty good shape on finance. When you get to the SAM journal policies, there's a whole lot of things in the binders that they're older and they're just not relevant anymore. One was about somebody using the SAM facilities at night, 10 years ago, which was appropriate at the time. Buying laptops, 5 years ago, what should they have? I think with a fairly common sense approach to what should still be in there, you could weed out a lot of things that just aren't current and aren't necessary. And then whatever's left over, like who answers the phone and where do you park the cars and who has keys and things that are relevant to the day-to-day operations. Again, if anybody comes in here and tries to help Sam, they're going to go back to staff and say, well, where do you tell people to park the cars, or how do you control your keys, or who answers the phone? So at the end of the day, the staff really ends up having to update those and decide which ones are relevant. And then in the binders, there are a whole bunch of older SAM resolutions, and they were all intermixed. How many of them are relevant or necessary? Some of them are, 10, 20, 30 years old. I mean, some of them are just ancient. Rather than toss them, my recommendation would be just to create a resolutions binder and put them in there in chronological order and just hang on to them. So in case something ever does come up, we've got access to them. And then going through all this, I think Jeanette and I both agreed the staff needs to have master binders. And the 6 is what I came up with. It could be whatever number. But those master binders should be updated, cleaned up, table of contents, and then locked up. There can be a copy out there for people to look at. So if a union person wants to come in and know about how do we do sick pay or whatever it is, or gee, what's the best way, how do we handle acid or something? Not that kind of acid. You could look through the safety binder, but really people shouldn't have access to the originals, the master binders. Only staff should have that. And then lastly, I think they should get all scanned into the server. So once we've got them, they're clean and up to date.
So who prepared this sheet? Is this from you or
I
from
did.
staff?
I did. Again, this is just me sitting down with the binders, looking through them, seeing what's in there, and saying to myself, gee, what's really important? Like I said, I think HR and safety are very important in terms of legal concerns. The other ones, I don't think are that terribly difficult. And I think just logically, if you've been here and you've been working here, when you look at some of the things, they jump out and say, oh, this isn't relevant. This happened 10 years ago. We don't need that now. You can toss that. But something may say, gee, we really need to update what time can people show up for work? Can they be here half an hour early? Can they be 5 minutes? That's the kind of thing you want to sit down and just say, okay, what should our policy be? Update it, and you've got it in the book. So the only ones, like I said, I think, A, B, C, and D, I would say you'd want to bring in outside people that are familiar with this and have them do it. You know, HR, 5,000 to 7,000, safety a couple thousand. Union should be just creating the binder. I don't think there's anything necessary there. The HR attorney said to me that they would look to see what's in the union agreement. For example, and I don't even know, if we don't address sick pay, how do you handle it? That could be something you'd want to put into your SAM resolutions. I'm assuming the union agreement talks to all the basics. Vacation, sick pay, things of that nature, which tend to be in most any union agreement.
It appears that the manager's shaking his head no, it's not.
I'm shaking my head, I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. So is it in the MOU, those kind of things?
I don't think sick pay is in the MOU, is it, Jeanette?
Yes.
In the MOU? No.
Well, sick,
I think we have personnel that parallels it, and there are places where they're covered in both places, so that's something you want to get rid of, you want to
I
get down.
believe it is, but I'm not certain. I know that sick days are addressed. And,
I think that-
vacation days are addressed.
They are addressed
Holidays
in
are
the MOU,
addressed,
how many
yeah.
days you get per year and how many, according to how many years you've worked.
I
I mean,
believe
that's
they
the
are,
way,
yeah.
yeah, that's what it was when I was on SAM.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused. We just approved the minutes for last month. In the minutes, there was a motion, I made it, Rick Kowalczyk seconded it, we voted, there were 8 ayes, the motion passed. And it sounds like our plan of record has been called into question and undermined by a single board member.
I don't think he's undermined, I think he's trying to ask if there's a way to do this at.
Well, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I certainly understand the, you bump into somebody, you run something past them, something doesn't sound right, so you come ask some questions. I get that. That part I don't have any problem with. But I do have some issue with, if I understand correctly, I saw the email from the general manager and I saw the staff report, it looks to me like an individual board member is coming in and giving direction directly to the general manager, and I'm confused by that because I'm sure that we all know that that's not how this works.
I don't think it was any direction. There were questions asked.
Holding up implementation of the plan of record voted 8-0 by the board seems to me to be giving direction.
I think the board has an option here to say, gee, we still think the decision we made is still correct.
I hear what you're saying, but I'd kind of like to stick to the process issue here for a minute.
Go ahead.
Well, when Mr. Alafano contacted me and said that he thought it could be done for a lot less, I emailed the general manager asking him if he was okay delaying it on his authority, because I didn't really want to call a special meeting for it, so it certainly appears that he did decide to delay it and bring it back to the board. And the only reason for that is because I was interested in the possibility that we might get it done for a lot less, but now it's kind of sounding like maybe a little less, so do we really need to revisit this?
I would say, again, I double checked this, HR, somewhere in the range of 5,000. Safety, and this is a guess here, maybe a couple thousand. The union should be basically what it is. Finance is something we do ourselves. The general policy should be something we do, and the resolutions are basically filing. So I'm gonna say on the outside, I think we're in the range of maybe 10,000. So in the spirit of trying to find a way to save some money.
I don't like the idea that an individual board member comes in and directs staff, and, if there's something where you think we've really got a serious misstep on the numbers, I think the board should be consulted about whether or not we want to have a special meeting on this.
I went through the chair, and it explained what I was seeing, and he then said to the GM, can we hold up, not cancel the contract, but just hold the contract until we've all had a chance to review this.
But we haven't had a chance. You've had a chance because you thought there was a problem. I had no idea that there was a problem. We could have done some investigation, or we could have checked things out.
And now you're a month ahead of us in having done your queries with the staff. And you're bringing this, after having voted to go forth, you spent a month going through this, and now I'm going, what's going on?
But I think I mean, any director has the ability to question whatever has happened.
Sure.
And if you go through the proper channels, and I'm not saying right or wrong, but I'm just telling you that, you know, the procedures for what was done was, he did go through the chair, and the chair did go to staff. It's not like he undermined anybody, so I think you guys, Scott, I really don't like the word that you said he undermined. He didn't undermine anything. He went to Leonard and he went to staff.
Well, I
And if
mean,
he
I know
questioned-
I know you don't like the word. I don't like the feeling that,
Well, you know,
that
it's
an
not
individual board
any-
member has undermined.
There's other times that other board members have done that, and don't say that have not. And you have been guilty of doing that also, of coming back and changing things. So it's not that all of us have not done.
At the board table.
That's
At the
where we
board
are.
table.
We are,
That's where
we
we
are
are.
at a
There's a
board
lot of
table.
stuff that happened in the meantime, and we've got a,
Nothing's happened.
No action's been taken, Scott.
Nothing's happened, he's just bringing forward information.
We delayed
If
the
you don't
contract.
want it, you don't want it, but don't stay there and accuse a board member of undermining when he hasn't.
So are we bringing this up for, well, what are we doing? We're bringing this up for discussion, are we gonna re-vote?
Well,
Well, where are we?
we've got a plan of record, we got an 8-0 vote. We don't have, I don't have anything in front of me that adds it up. When you go over, you know, the item on like the finance, we should do that ourselves, but you yourself said we should get Parsons and maybe the auditors to look over it. I'm sure they'll work for free. You know, I mean, this is,
Would you prefer to spend the 25,000?
you know, we took a vote a month ago.
No, you didn't answer my question.
We took a vote a month ago. It's fine to call it into question here, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with what happened in the intervening weeks. That's the part that I'm raising a question about.
Would it have been better for me to ignore this and spend the 25,000 and then more money for an HR attorney later? As opposed to maybe spending 10,000? I'm confused. I don't know how you would have liked to have this come down. I mean, I went through the chair went to the GM, I prepared this, you know, with a draft, an idea, and it's in front of the board. I mean, these things have been out of date for years and years. So if we take another month or two to decide how best to update them, the world's not gonna stop turning. And that's, to me, what we're doing.
And that's why I didn't wanna call a special meeting for it, 'cause I
Yeah.
figured, you know, if it's been sitting there for that many years, it can be delayed for another month while we bring it back and see if the board wants to reconsider the previous approval or not. And, you know, we could quite easily, at this agenda item, decide not to reconsider it.
There's no big, if you decide you don't want to, you don't want to, but God, you should have a
But, you
discussion.
know, I thought that we should hear the case for reconsideration.
Let's face facts, when, and I'm not faulting the GM, I understand these binders have been there gathering dust for a long time, and from his point of view, they need to be updated.
Well, from my point of view, if they've been gathering dust, why do we need them in the first place?
Well, there's no doubt, we need to have current HR and current safety policies and so forth. But there's probably 10, 15 different directions you could go to try and get this updated. Staff came up with one idea, and we sat here and I listened. I was a little thrown by the amount of money, and I think we all questioned that at the meeting, as I recall. And then we were also told we'd still have to have an HR attorney review the policies because she wasn't a California attorney. So there was gonna be more money. So as I left the meeting, I still had a nagging question on my mind if this was the best way to do it. And the more I looked into it, the more it just seemed like could be a better way. And I took the time to come here and actually go through the binders and look at them. And I think it's an eye-opener. So here's what I would recommend. I'd recommend if you all want to take the time now, like I've done, to come in here and look at the binders and see what is in there, and see if this makes sense, fine. If you all don't want, we come back, we want to go with the original contract, which is on hold, fine. It should be a board decision. But I don't think,
Well, you know, we made that decision. That's the really weird thing, the act of an individual board member holding up the execution of a contract. It's kind of unusual. And it's at least worth discussing whether or not that's the procedure that we wish to follow.
give me your suggestion, what you think should have happened.
You know, starting with the business about verbally running this past someone who does this without having for that person something to take a look at to see the scope of the work, and then bringing back a concern based on that verbal. I didn't see that going good places from the get-go. That
This attorney has done public agencies. He said, how big is the agency? I said 14 people. And he said, gee, in those kind of cases, the stuff is fairly cut and dry. Sexual
so
harassment,
in
substance
the-
abuse.
in the correspondence we've got, I called the attorney and discussed the issue with him. When he learned that the scope of the assignment was wider than just a personnel manual, he retracted his comments about the cost. Doing this verbally on an action the board has already taken, I mean, I'm glad that you're looking out for the cost, okay? I'm not complaining about that. I think we all do that. I mean, I hope we do. Timing on it's awkward because the board's already acted. I agree, this almost certainly can wait a little while. I don't mind that either, but I'm just real uncomfortable. And it comes from some of the abuses of the past where we'd have an individual board member come in and try to run the show. And we really need to steer really wide of that because we've had that in the past. We don't need that anymore. And you ask a fair question. And what would I recommend on this? Things like this, I say, you know, ask for a special meeting. I'll show up.
That was the concept the chair kicked around, and he said based on the situation, he didn't see it as necessary.
Yeah, that's why I asked, you know, in the email, which was in the packet, that's why I asked the general manager if he would be okay with delaying it on his own authority rather than calling a special meeting. And so obviously, he decided then that that was okay. I really don't think this rated a special meeting, and you know, so implicit in my question to the general manager was the suggestion that, yeah, he probably should decide to delay it, which he did. And, you know, it may be a subtle distinction, but it was not me telling the general manager to delay it, but suggesting that it would probably be a good idea. I really think it kind of would have been a waste of resources to call a special meeting for this when there was no urgency to it. Now, you know,
Did we know of any constraints on the consultant and their time availability?
Actually, she was having longer term, I mean, she was okay with it because she told us that she would be able to work on it through the summer, but there was no pressing need. You know, it wasn't conflicting with anything. She had other things going on and she wouldn't have started this for a while. That was in my thinking as well, that it's been since 1980, some of these things have been there since 1983, it could wait another month. But yeah, she gave us a long period of time to look at it in terms of, I think she has it scheduled to be finished in November. Is that what she said, Jenna?
She has here on her proposal that the revisions would be delivered by June 30th. The non-represented employee handbook by
You don't have to
September
read the whole
1.
thing. The overall thing is it's not gonna be
The
until
end of it,
November.
October 1st.
Okay,
And we
I
were
don't
gonna
know.
start this project on May 6th.
So that'll be November 1st if we go forward with it. It's, yeah.
You know, if it was only a couple $1,000s, I wouldn't be too concerned. I wouldn't have made any fuss at all. But on top of the 25, as we knew from the meeting, we were gonna have to spend more money for an HR attorney. So we could have been somewhere between 25 and 30,000. And when you start digging into what's in these binders, like I said, I think fairly accurately, with getting specialists in here who work with HR, who work with safety, I can't see this exceeding $10,000. Maybe I'm wrong. So my recommendation would be, let's pursue this. Let's allow the GM to take this and see what comes of it. If we can save 10 or 15,000 and get it done properly, I'd say that's the best way to do it. If it turns out that no, that won't work and we're still better off with this consultant, then we go back to the original contract.
Can I suggest that, maybe we need to basically proceed on the contract, but that before the consultant actually gets started, the staff evaluate all the different components with an eye toward, can some of those in fact be done in-house? And instead of paying the consultant, because the consultant wasn't a fixed price, it was a not to exceed price. So if you could do some of the components in-house,
I think staff's track record on doing things in-house with that binder has been pretty poor. I mean, that's just my observation from looking at the papyrus in it.
Well, again, there's, in addition to Scott's arguments, which is one flow of the conversation, we are here today, right now, with an opportunity to look at this again. One of the benefits we had discussed was not having to use staff time. Is there a feeling, as let's say E and F, for instance, is E something that a consultant could do with no input from you folks, or is the consultant going to be sitting with staff saying, what do you mean by that, what do you mean by that, what do you mean by that, what do you mean by that? So, I mean, is that a good point he's brought up, that would be a poor use of our funds? I mean, there was one thing, having one person come in and sweep through everything would give at least a standardization and a uniformity to everything, which I thought was a benefit that would be worth paying for also. If it didn't involve staff time, that would be a benefit, because it's not like everybody just sitting around doing nothing. Some points have been raised about some of these might be easy, like SAM resolutions. I would personally feel better with having a real finance person do the finance, if we're talking about having our accountants do that for us.
Absolutely.
That could make sense. So I wouldn't just start the contract right now and just let her start working. If we're going to debate this, then I would, if we want to discuss right now, is there a better way to do this that isn't going to take up a lot of staff time?
well,
And us do some, but like we could do the SAM resolutions if it's just refiling and scanning and throwing in a binder.
I think there's two pieces to that. Yes, clearly we have to interact with the person looking at certainly Sam's policies. There's another piece of this thing. It's what's unsaid. There, what policies are we missing? I mean, there are things that I agree. There's some policies in there that you look and say, what do we have that there for? And we need to have some discussion about whether that should remain there. But there's other policies that are missing that we don't know that we should have for legal purposes or should have for general administrative purposes. There are some board policies that I'd like to try and get put in there, and those are things that will take staff time. But a piece of it is it's one thing to have a 20-minute conversation. It's another thing to have to produce a document and have to and such. So this was a way to move it forward, and I'm certainly amenable to doing whatever the board thinks is appropriate to get this done. I think it's important that we have up-to-date policies and that are researchable and defendable if we ever have a particular problem somewhere. So,
Well, I would say we've already approved the not to exceed, so let's let Steve take Alan's recommendations and comments and go forth and do what you think that staff can do or not do and just proceed. That's fine with me, so we don't need to take any action. We need no, I would say that we need no action at this point.
Well, if we decide to break it up and have like our accountants do the finance side, we wouldn't want to leave a $25,000 contract in the hands of its personnel, and then have to pay the attorney, and then have to pay, our accountants to go over our finances.
Well, this
can
doesn't avoid paying an attorney anyway. I mean,
Well, the suggestion was to have an HR attorney do it in the first place.
But this consultant said that it would still have to be reviewed by an attorney.
She's an attorney, but she will not stand behind it as an attorney. She will write it that way, and I assume that will make it, that she'll get it right, but she wants a California barred attorney to, is the right term? Barred attorney? To certify.
Did she give you any idea what that might cost?
No.
On top of her
We're
fee?
talking about two different things. One is to have one review
Right.
and sign off on it. The other is to have an HR attorney do the work. So you would have a principal doing all the work at principal rates, right? So,
Are they significantly higher than
I don't know.
her rates? I thought her rates were
but it's gonna be,
pretty.
if they're equivalent, then there's no savings. If,
Yes, there is, because you have to have another attorney review her work.
yeah.
She's not a registered California attorney and also not HR. So why would you want somebody doing your HR that's not HR and pay them and then have to pay somebody else?
What I'm kind of thinking here is that the different components here, and it looks like Ellen may have done a reasonable job at subdividing it in the A through F here. I wonder if we need to consider these individually as to where to farm them out to. Because it kind of sounds to me like it may make sense to farm out different pieces of this to different people. The finance, I heard somebody say accountant, I'm actually thinking auditor. I think auditors would be much more appropriate to specify finance policies than the accountant.
Through the chair, the auditors won't write our
No.
policies for us, but they will be happy to review them
Okay.
and give their seal of approval, but probably the accountant would have to
So-
do something.
Correct me if
I'm
I'm
sorry,
wrong.
I gotta correct him. She's not an attorney. She doesn't charge
No,
attorney.
she's
No,
not.
no, there she is. Okay, it's down, all right, she is. But that's what she's pitching is that she does HR consulting, okay, not selling the services as legal services and billing accordingly. The hourly rate's $150, and there's no HR attorney who's gonna bill $150.
But what I'm saying is, if you have to have an HR attorney approve it, you still are gonna have to hire an HR attorney. 'Cause
Well,
she's not
sure.
one by so you're paying twice. So you have her write it, and then you have to have somebody review it.
Well, it's not gonna be the same level of effort to do a review as
So
it is to create.
why wouldn't you just have somebody just do it?
Well, it's for the same reason that we, when we're working with engineering firms, we don't have the principals do the drafting. I mean,
You don't
it's
have to have the principal do it.
the,
If you go to an HR attorney, I'm sure you don't have the principal always doing it. It's the
No,
same thing when you go to an auditor.
But I think what Director Boyd was saying is that in the engineering firm, you might have one engineer do the bulk of the work, and then the principal
Well, that's
in
what
the
happens.
firm might review the
But
other
that's the same
engineer.
thing that happens in an attorney's office. You have different people that are HR working at different levels.
Okay, I don't know where we're going with this.
Well, let me make a suggestion. Again, this was really presented to the board to try and do hopefully a better job with updating everything here and hopefully save some money. So my recommendation would be to give this back to staff, the contract's on hold, let them evaluate this concept versus the original one we approved, let them come back to us with their suggestion after looking at both directions. And if it,
come back?
have staff come back, if it's significant savings, and we have specialists looking at things like HR attorneys, like safety consultants, fine. If it turns out there's no savings, and it'll end up being the same result, then fine, go, they can suggest the original contract.
So I would suggest at this point in this agenda item that we, if necessary by motion, agree that staff can proceed with what we previously approved, but that we're asking staff to reevaluate it and decide if they think that maybe there's better alternatives. In other words, it doesn't have to come back to the board again if staff decides that it can be done in different ways, piecemeal, with significant savings. And if staff decides that no, it can't be, then they proceed on with the previous approval.
That's what I said. I think that we'll let staff.
Let staff look at these one at a time, and they can do it, themselves, they can divide it up themselves appropriately. If not, then go with the whole contract.
Since we have a little bit, this has caused a little discomfort here, this process. If we're gonna send it back and try to get either individual or combo bids here, I think it'd be cleaner just to bring it back to the board rather than, because if staff could make a decision some people don't like, and then this could go on and on and on. I'd like to bring it back if that's where we're gonna head, and then make a board decision to either continue with what we had or break it up in pieces, I'll just call it that.
So fine.
And I think a month would be adequate, end of June.
Through the chair, if I might inquire of council, we've executed a contract.
Yes.
You're hearing what we're talking about. Do you see any pitfalls for us here?
You have an executed contract. I don't know what the consequences of now backing away from that contract. Steve has talked with this particular vendor, and she's willing to stop. That's all I've been told. I've not talked to the person.
That's a different matter.
But for the record, you do have an executed contract. The contract was executed prior to the brakes being put on, so that's the sequence.
When you say executed, you mean signed contract?
Yes, both parties have signed it.
Steve, do you think, based on your interaction with her, do you think that if you were to go back and say, well, could you do this, this, and this, and let us find somebody else to do this and this and this, do you think she'd be okay with that, with amending the contract?
It probably depends on, on how much work she needs and what she sees. I mean, she envisioned this as a certain, she came in and looked at our stuff, and she envisioned it a certain way when she made the proposal. We can talk to her about it. The staff time to go and recruit, other potential vendors is, I mean, it's not an inconsequential task. It takes time, and whether I could, Director Alfano asked me to do it in a month, I don't know. I mean, we can go back and look at it. We can talk to her and say, we only, we changed our mind, we only want you to do this piece, are you okay with that? It's a possibility.
So Steve, what's the original contract amount?
Amount?
Yeah.
Not to exceed 25,000.
Not to exceed 25,000. So, it's an executed contract, we should just go ahead and continue on. And you can make, this is gonna be complicated, staff time.
It is, I mean, we don't have a lot of free staff time to, I mean, one of the reasons why we focused on having a consolidated effort is because we don't have a lot of, we have, keep in mind, we have two management staff, and they run everything here. So, I mean, look, I'm willing to take a look at anything the board can agree to, but, there are limits, and there are sideboards to these things in terms of how much time and how much we know about some of this stuff.
Yeah, we've already given you one task, and that is to talk about the reserve refunds, and now we're gonna give you another task. I think we should just continue on and accomplish it, and I view of accomplishing something tonight.
I agree with Director Loman. I think it's pretty clear. Let staff relook at this, bring it back to us, and tell us what they think makes the most sense. Again, it's couple $1,000, I'm not hung up, but if it's significant amounts of money, and we're gonna have experts looking at these, I think it's a wiser way to go. But I'm willing to let staff take this and come back to us.
But we have an executed contract.
And let staff take a look at that. I mean, it's basically X amount of, dollars per hour. So if she works for 10 hours, the contract didn't say we have to pay her $25,000. Said not, we said not to exceed. Right.
She has a billing rate of $150 per hour through the chair, and the agreement is not to exceed 25,000.
Right.
So.
I don't think there's no minimum in the contract, as I recall.
No.
Yeah.
She does have a termination clause on page 7 of the agreement in the packet, and in there she says that SAM shall have the option at its sole discretion and without cause of terminating this agreement by giving 7 days prior written notice to the consultant as provided herein, and upon termination of the agreement, each party shall pay to the other party that portion of compensation specified in this agreement that is earned and unpaid. So,
Yeah.
if we want to terminate it, we could give her 7 days notice.
No, this
I
is
don't
something
know
that
about
before-
holding it off.
This is something where
Months.
we do have the clause, and I was reading it. It does look like we have room to do that, but until council's reviewed that, I'm not gonna presume that that's all there
No,
is to it.
that's true. We're reading it right here together.
Yeah, I mean, and it looks like we can terminate, just with 7 days' notice, but
The question is, if you terminate, then the question is whether there's been any time expended.
Right,
But that
and-
can't be much. But
Well, and that's the kind of thing I'd want you to look at, to make sure that we're not getting into something deeper, because if we're trying to save money, and we go the wrong way, it's, so.
There's one thing I'm not seeing in the contract, which I thought of because of one of the bullet points on Director Alfano's page here, and that's number 10, scanned documents. No, I really don't like scanned documents. We need to have original electronic source materials and not scanned documents, which are 10 times the file size. So any new materials that are created by the consultant, I would actually like to see this in a formal contract amendment, whether we continue on with this contract or do something totally different. It needs to specify that any new materials or substantially rewritten materials need to be delivered to Sam in the original electronic form, and then Sam will print whatever paper copies we need for our purposes. So
Are you modifying the contract after the fact?
I'm asking for us to
Amendment.
see about getting that amendment
All right.
made.
There's always amendments to.
You know, the right time for all this, just saying, would have been about a month ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been the right time to do all this. And part of what makes this so awkward is that we did have a long discussion, and these things didn't come up. And, I'm not saying don't second guess it, but just understand that when we do this, now we're gonna have either attorney go check to see what our options are, we've gotta have our general manager go and take a second look at something that's already been looked at to some degree. I mean, we're making more work, and, don't have a big staff. They've adapted to almost everything we've thrown at them, but, I'd like to save it for some of the bigger things. And this is
big.
well, and we picked someone who does this kind of work, and all agreed that this is the way to go. We all agreed unanimously, all of us, a month ago. So we may have, look, we have more information, great. it sounds like staff's gonna go take more look at this. That's fine, but don't like the process. The right time for this is when it's actually in front of us, and if we didn't have enough then, I would have been urging that we, delay it till now so they could have done a lot of that work, and then tonight we could have been deciding something.
How many possible consultants did you check with to see if they would bid on this?
2.
And one of them declined, if I recall?
I'm a little concerned about going out again for, trying to track down, different legal people or different safety people and trying to divvy this up. Most contracts, if you get some consolidation of stuff, it's cheaper than breaking this into 4 or 5 pieces. And staff time, I'm a little concerned about trying to track down, HR attorneys and getting bids from all these people and trying to evaluate all these people again, so I'm concerned about more staff time. I'm just not sure how much we're gonna gain, and then if you have 6 sets of manuals, each one of which has a different numbering system, a different filing system, a different format, that's not gonna look cool. I mean, everything should look alike, so I like the standardization feature. I just don't know if we want to just keep dragging this out. So I don't know. I'm a little against just telling staff, oh, go figure some stuff out and do what you want. That kind of sticks them with the, well, how much do I do? Do I get like 5 attorneys to bid? Do I talk to my people? Do I get some outside consultants? I think we have to give them direction. Either do it or don't do it or something like that. Don't just let them try to guess what we want out of this whole thing at this point. So.
We already have given them direction, and
right.
I think we already have executed contract, so I think that we're all done.
I mean, so if we're not gonna tell them, go out and get this, and go out and get this, and go out and get that. If we want to, I could back some of that, but not just let them go see if they can save money. I think that's an undue burden on them at this point, so.
Well, I think for me, and I think your HR is crucial that you have somebody that really knows HR that doesn't. If anything, out of all of this, HR is the crucial. You're gonna get in trouble if you don't have HR and it's not done correctly. So I think having HR, to me, is really crucial. As far as safety and the union thing, those all come from the union anyway. That's all part of Cal OSHA and all of that. So it's not like, you're going to be coming up with all kinds of new things. But as far as finance, Parsons can do the finance, I think. And your general policies and resolutions, you're not developing anything. They're all developed unless you go through that policy book. You don't even know what the heck you have. So for somebody to come in and say you need these when they don't even know what you have is totally ridiculous. So I just think it just needs to really be looked at and overall before you even go out and say what the heck you want. I don't think anybody really took time out to see what you had. And HR, I think, is crucial. I mean, it gets every organization in trouble.
And
If you don't have the,
This
That's-
consultant here, it says vice president, director level, senior human resources executive.
exactly, except you have to have somebody check it out.
Right, and we
Right.
signed on for that last month. We agreed to do that.
And then
Last month.
we have to spend more money to get an HR attorney.
No, we agreed to do that step last month.
On
right here
top
at
of
this
the
board table.
25.
That's what we agreed to do.
Right.
That's our plan of record.
Well, I'm just saying, I've not been involved, I haven't even talked to Alan about this, but that, if I was looking at this, and when I saw all these things that haven't been touched and done, I mean, it's crazy.
Did this consultant come in and see what we have?
Yes, she did.
But, I mean, her expertise is HR. I mean, that's that's where, I mean, she's named her firm, it's personnel. You know, so that's her focus, and,
So if her thing is personnel, focusing on personnel, then how is she
HR.
going to do
She's an
safety, union, finance, general policies, and resolutions?
Well, we would have to, staff would have to work with her,
Well,
Tony,
that's what I'm
myself,
saying,
and
so we're
Steve.
talking about, we're worried about staff time, and if she's only gonna do HR, then I'll tell you, all these other 5 things, staff's gonna be doing anyway.
The one thing that I'm not clear is what SAM resolutions is even on here for.
The personnel rules are in resolution form, and they're dated back to 1983. So the personnel rules have to be rewritten, brought up to date, maybe taken out of resolution format, I don't know. She would probably confer with
Well,
Steve.
if they're resolutions and they need to be changed, then we need to bring
Right.
replacement resolutions to the
Right.
board. But resolutions are just filed in chronological order.
Right.
Now, they probably need to be replicated into.
Can we
appropriate
stop
places.
doing the consultant's work? I mean, this is,
Yeah.
how long into this meeting are we gonna go on this topic?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I think we're.
are you?
I mean, I look, and this is the whole thing I'm going on about is, here we are regurgitating and rehashing this whole thing again. We've got a plan of record. Honestly, I don't see enough in front of me to convince me that we should, chuck this and go a different route. I don't
I
see
call
it.
for the question,
There's-
this is going crazy.
What would be the motion?
I don't know,
No,
we need to decide.
Well,
It's
you and I are
already
both
8:15
expressing our
and
desire to
You guys are just
move on.
going around in a circle.
Um,
So you either agree with it or you don't, we ought to bring it to a vote.
Okay.
All right, so, somebody wanna make a motion?
No, I make a motion that we leave the contract as is.
Well, we don't have to do a motion to leave it.
That we don't do it? Yeah, okay, I think we've done.
Okay,
Okay,
We just-
the motion
I'm
I would,
asking
I
that-
would make then would be that we direct staff,
Okay.
based on our discussions tonight and this document, to relook at the process, decide if there are significant savings, and come back to the board, hopefully at the end of June, with a recommendation.
Second.
I'll just say, I'm content with what we did last month.
Understand?
And I fully expect the consultant's work to be done, to be overseen by the manager and stay on top of that. And I don't expect that to be any different from what I expected a month ago. And when it comes to, looking in the contract, it's all about, they're gonna do some work, they're gonna submit bills as they go every month. And I fully expect before we pay any bill, we're gonna wanna be sure that the work is going the direction we want it to be going in. I expect the manager to be the one overseeing that. If we're not getting a good enough work product, we got a termination clause that I would expect that he would use. So in my vote to stick with what we did last month, that's what I'm thinking.
It gives staff a month to look at this. If they decide that the original plan was a good plan, come back and say that, boom, off they go. On the other hand, if they say, gee, on a second look, we find we can save 5, 10, 15,000, then I think that's something worth looking into. That's all I'm simply saying. I'm not staff. I mean, I took time out of my day to come here and look at the binders, because I didn't know. We get the agenda on what, Thursday, Friday? Okay, that barely gives me any time to even really understand what's in there, much less really dig in. So after the fact, I come in here and I look at the binders, and it's an eye-opener. So I would take, we're in no huge rush, stuff's been sitting around for years, let's give staff one more month to look at it, and come back to us and say, yep, the original plan is good, let's go with it, or we've modified. That's all I'm simply saying. It's not gonna hurt anything. So why don't we call for the question?
I'd like to just make one more comment. I've become a little more concerned about some of these items now, like finance. When we were just talking binders, it was talking nebulous binders over there. What do we feel that its personnel skill is in finance area from your guys' exposure to her?
It looks to me that her expertise is in human resource, actually, and she was a human resource attorney, though she's not practicing, but I would say that the accountants would overview it. That would be a good thought.
Well, I
And
mean,
also
I
have
would
the
go so far,
auditors. The
yeah.
auditors have looked over our accounting procedures and policies and gave their blessing to it, but, and they ask in our audits if we have anything to add or change in our policy. And if we do, we bring it forward to them in that auditing year. Otherwise, they just leave it status quo. So I would say if it has the auditor's approval, it wouldn't have to be changed unless the manager saw fit to
Correct,
change
but
something in it.
most of our policies are derived from resolutions of the board. So part of that is going back and sorting those out because, you know, there is a mishmash of them to go back and make sure that if they can be consolidated into smaller areas. Or there may be some places where someone looks and says, from their experience at other agencies, to say, hey, there's a couple other things you need here, in terms of, you know, what we need to go forward with. But, again, it's taking what we have and a lot of it isn't creating new stuff. A lot of it is taking what we have and transforming it into something that's consistent. I'd like to come up with a binder that has numbered pages, so when we change them, you know, it's like a book subscription. You get 4 or 5 pages a year that you change in your binder. So there's a formatting production question here that having one person do it is important. Yeah, I don't, you know, I think she's going to be taking materials that have been developed by Sam over the years in many different formats and trying to bring them into one.
There are also, through the chair, some old general policies that are many years old, but they haven't changed, and we don't want to change them. So they may seem to a layperson like, wow, this thing is dated, you know, 2003, but it still holds true here at the SAM plant that we would like the staff to adhere to that policy.
And I
That
think
makes
that's
sense.
always good
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah. So she will be working extensively with staff. We have to give her, of course, the manager, myself and Tony, direction, you know, what to weed out, what not to. But she doesn't have attorney experience. I mean, she can't do that overview that Director Olafano was talking about. I don't know what that would cost.
Well, again, my question is, would they have the ability to make recommendations on our finance policies?
No, she would not. I don't think so.
I mean, it seems silly to have her even look at them in that case.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
Other than retyping them for us in a good format.
So I guess your point is, yeah, the accountants could look at them.
I mean, the accountants you're saying are perfectly happy with them.
The auditors.
The auditors.
Yeah.
So what kind of changes would you want to make if the auditors have basically approved them? Are these just cleaning up kind of stuff?
Well, like this year, anticipating only one change, we're gonna change, obtaining a W-9 for a vendor prior to, entering a payment for them so that we have their federal ID number on file for 1099s at the end of the year if we need to do so. So that's just one small change to that, policy.
Rick, the direction you're headed, maybe it makes sense to have the HR attorney come in and do that portion. Have the safety consultant make sure safety's updated and clean. Unions is what it is, finance, we can have them look at it. At that point, having spent $5,000 or $10,000, then I agree, it may make sense to have this person come in and organize everything. Spend whatever time it takes to get it in nice, clean, numbered pages, all looking identical, but I gotta tell you, I don't think that's $25,000 once the major things have been brought up to speed. But I think that's the decision the staff has to make of how best to do this, based on, I don't know, new information, whatever you want to call it.
Through the chair, on the safety items, we do have Cal OSHA rules and regulations, but Tony has SOPs on safety that come, I think, through CSRMA, don't they?
Yeah.
And CSRMA is our self-insured
I would think that's
company,
their company.
and they can make recommendations on how to update that safety SOP with Tony's approval. I have no idea what goes on out there in the plant. But
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling that we sort of, I don't know if I want to use the word rush, but I think we went into that contract without complete enough information. So I'm really kind of up in the air here on where to go with it at this point. And so let me ask Director Boyd and Director Harvey, how much of a downside is there really to what is requested in Director Alfano's motion?
I expect the staff to have the discretion to provide the oversight to do what we asked them to do, which was get the policy manuals updated. We've got a consultant to do a fair bit of the work. I fully expect that the staff is going to have involvement, and don't see any particular need for us to tell them to be involved to save us money where they can do some of the work themselves. With their involvement, I think some of that becomes pretty obvious, right? So, wait a month. I'm still going to vote to stick with the plan of record because I don't really perceive that what we've done tonight really brings a lot of value to this, nor is it going to, majorly change the outcome. If I'm wrong, remind me of it when we've got the details, and I'll eat my words. Okay, that's fine.
So, can we hear the motion?
The motion was to direct staff based on this discussion tonight. Director Alfano.
To relook at this policy, this plan, and come back to us in a month and simply say, I've modified it, I'm gonna bring in an HR attorney first, I'm gonna bring a safety person, or this is how, we're gonna stay pretty much the way we originally agreed to do it. I think that's staff's responsibility to go figure out, based on this and what they already know, to come up with the best plan, with the best, with the least cost. That's all I'm after. It's not our job to do this part of it. It's really up to staff to come back and say, hey, we've re-looked at it, and here's now what we think is the best way to do it.
That was part of the original motion that we passed last
If we
month.
would have had the information. And I never saw the binders till I walked in the door and looked at them.
The staff has the information.
Okay, I didn't.
Okay.
I do now.
Okay.
And after seeing it, I'm sorry, I see that there's a better way to do this.
Okay.
So the motion's on the floor, okay, it's already 8:30, let's move this along. Let's put this back to staff.
I'd like to just make one quick comment. I'd like the staff, I'm gonna vote for that. I'm gonna say I'd like the staff to check with our accountants. I think there's probably excess work here that can possibly be trimmed out to reduce the cost. I would have our attorney, our accounting people and the auditors, have them tell us what we need to do to finance things. That's what would be my thing. Instead of having an HR person do it, I would like to have our accountants vote on that and say, well, you just need to clean them up and reorder them, or here's some other stuff. If it's just cleaning up and reordering them, then let its personnel clean them up and standardize everything so you folks aren't wasting your time doing that. And like resolutions, do they need to touch the resolutions? Maybe she's overscoped a little bit, and if we pull stuff out of there and then talk to her and say, we've reevaluated this a little bit, and we'd like to reduce the scope a little bit, we want to keep you with the contract, but what would it be if you don't touch finance and don't touch resolutions and that sort of thing. So if we're gonna do this, I'd like to have I'm more concerned about the finance. I'm assuming she knows how to handle HR with somebody looking over her shoulder for a second. But the finance, I don't see what her skill levels are in the finance area, so.
I am too.
I would also think that general policies needs to be written by staff and then reviewed by her to make sure it's okay. But I don't see how somebody outside the agency can even do general policies.
I agree with you. I agree with you. Policies are set by this board, not set by a consultant.
I don't think there's anything in the scope of work that had to do with changing the policies that are set by the board. Did you anticipate anything like that?
No, in fact, I mean, it gets down to the issue of policy and procedures. We have ways of accomplishing the board's policies by developing our own procedures to do it, but the board sets policy.
Right.
So when you're talking policy, you're talking board actions, typically resolutions, and we're talking procedures is sort of who signs the check first and who signs the check second, and a lot of that stuff, I think, needs to be codified. So, you know, but no, I'm very clear that things that are board policies will be backed up by board resolutions. That's how we'll do it as we put it together.
Okay, that explanation helped me understand that. So, are we approaching a general agreement at all, or is this gonna
Let's
be
just
a
vote.
significantly split vote?
Does that,
All right,
Yeah.
does
No,
that matter? I mean,
That's why people vote.
yeah.
Yeah, I think
All right.
what Rick said was very clear.
Point of order, we have a motion, is there an amendment to the motion over here? And has it been seconded, or how'd you wanna proceed?
No, I don't think mine was an amendment.
He was just
A
clarifying.
Suggestion.
Yeah.
It was just clarifying how that might work.
Okay.
Through the chair, I'm not clear on the motion, are you, Susie?
Yeah, I didn't actually hear what sounded like a complete motion.
No, it wasn't.
Direct the staff, based on the discussion tonight, to relook at the plan and bring it back in a month.
Look at what.
To look at his.
To clarify the motion, to relook at the procedures to update our policies by breaking them into categories and possibly using individual experts.
so are you saying basically this?
Well, I am for HR, I am for safety, I am for finance. The other things, if staff feels it's best to bring in this consultant for the other things to look through them and clean them up at a reduced cost, that can make sense, but
I'm sorry, the motion was really unclear to me at this point about what we're talking about.
No, that's what
I didn't
I'm trying to-
realize we were talking about this.
That's why I'm trying to make it really clear what exactly is the motion.
what I'm trying to say in the motion is I really think I'm trying to move the burden back to staff to say, based on the discussion tonight, to relook at the plan to update our policies and procedures and come back to us with a plan, either the existing that we approved or a modified plan.
Can I suggest that as part of the language of your very last point, that the motion say modified plan potentially to include using different specialists?
Yes.
Okay, does the recording secretary think that she has the entire motion?
I have to update the policies and procedures and come back with a modified plan using,
I think the first word you said updated should be review.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's review.
But not review the policies, review
No.
the
Plan.
work plan.
Work plan, yeah, there you go.
okay,
Okay, does everyone think they understand what the motion is?
Yeah.
Those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Nays?
Nay.
Motion passes 6-2. With Director Board and Director Harvey voting no. All right. Item 6B, adopt, oops, I'm in the wrong place. 5B, SAM committee authorized GM to close out well overflow management project construction and adopt the resolution next number in sequence. The resolution accepting completion of work and directing filing of notice of completion for WWFFP.
We're bringing this back, Mr. Chair, from last month. There's some questions raised about the closeout of the contract with the contractor. There was a concern about the contractor not having watered the site to stimulate the growth of the seeds they put on that. I've revisited the situation with myself and with the engineers on the project, and have come back with a different proposal. The original intent of the recovery of that site was to return it to its original state, and the fact that the contractor didn't water it after he had revegetated it with the appropriate seeds. Those seeds really were for a different purpose. The seeds that the contractor was part of his contract to distribute are really to prevent erosion, and erosion for a number of reasons wasn't a problem, but what you have there is a piece of bare ground. To get to the original intent of the contract was to have the before and after be the same thing. Talked to the biologists that were on the site and suggested an approach where we would take, I don't know if you noticed, the Caltrans has been cutting their portion of the Burnham Strip, leaving, it looks like a bad haircut, leaving little bits and pieces here and there. And with the bare patch at the wet weather facility, it looks even worse. What we're proposing here is to take those cuttings and actually to cut down all the area around the wet weather facility site, and take those cuttings, which will be laden with those seeds from those local plants, spread it over the area, and then irrigate that, spray water on it a couple of times a month, or maybe more, depending on what people think is appropriate, and try and revegetate that quickly using the native grasses. I propose that we do so by making the final payment to Stoleski and Gonzalez, and we have his retention now a little over $30,000. I propose that we return $25,000 of that to him, withhold $5,000 to pay for this revegetation work back to the original ground cover, so we can get our notice of completion filed with the county and move forward in that way, and also have a way through the issue with the barren patch there. That's what this item amounts to.
I went out this afternoon to the site with GSD's Director Clark, who is an archaeologist by trade, and I was really hoping that I could talk him into coming here tonight for this agenda item, but he had something else to do, and obviously he's not here. It's actually kind of complicated, but the whole topsoil issue.
That's the problem.
Hmm?
That's the problem.
The topsoil's a problem. Basically, I went out there. We went out there with a shovel, and it's largely clay soil, which is yet another problem, unrelated to performance of the contractor or anything. But the very surface, in large part, there's a really thin veneer of topsoil, and then the lower layers, which are not topsoil, are right there, just a hair below the surface. So they, contrary to what the construction management engineer said, they did not put the topsoil back on top. And Director Clark said, well, that's typical for the way these guys work. They just look at it and say dirt is dirt. And he doesn't think that, even though the construction management engineer is saying they did it according to the contract, he doesn't think they did. But on top of that, There's yet another problem because it wasn't revegetated, and I can't remember the term he used. I think he said reduction. What's happened is the fine silt in the topsoil has blown away because it wasn't protected by vegetation. And what's now exposed are the heavy particles from the topsoil plus the other stuff from lower down. And he says that the fine particles have blown further south into the rest of the GSD property. And given the current conditions, I don't see how anything is gonna take there. It's hitting it with the shovel, it felt like I was hitting concrete. Nothing's gonna grow there in the current situation. I think that some, probably minimal, but some amount of topsoil is gonna have to be brought back. And I don't know if that can be done in that $5,000. I have no experience with that.
I would say that my concern about the topsoil, bringing back topsoil, whatever that means, because that can mean a whole bunch of different things, you will get different plants growing there. If the object is to get back to where you were, that's a harsh environment on anywhere you go on that site. It's hard, the whole thing is clay. That's what the soils report showed. If you import topsoil there, which is an option, you will get a different set of plants growing there. And what you'll end up is you'll have a square area of different plants. That'll happen, and over time they'll go back together. But you know, I know, and I'm not going to say that they got every bit of topsoil back. They did sequester the topsoil. I know that for a fact because I watched them skin it the day they took it off. They piled it in the back, and they had to put it back on last. What?
Do you recall how deep the topsoil layer was?
It was about 6 inches or better. I mean, the whole place. Anyway, we have the contractors retained earnings. I don't know how to move forward with this. My sense is if we move forward with topsoil, imported topsoil, that we will end up with a completely different patch of something growing there. And if that's the intent, that's fine. If that's not the intent, if the intent was to get it back to what it looked like a year and a half ago, I don't know that that's the best way through it. We talked to the biologist about it and said, how could we get this to look like it used to look? And that's was the suggestion. I did suggest in that we score the surface break up the surface a little bit so seeds would get into it. But that's a pretty tough environment, even with the best topsoil there. That's why those kind of weeds grow there. But anyway, that's my thought is that if you want to get it returned to where it was, you got to deal with the native plants, and if you enrich that topsoil just a little bit, you're going to get a whole different set of plants, so you might guess. But we'll do whatever the board is, wants to pursue.
I saw them skim the topsoil, a big pile of dark topsoil.
Yeah.
Put aside, and if you walk 150 feet in any direction, or towards the highway, you'll see the dark. You'll feel that there's the dark topsoil. That wasn't. I don't know what happened to that big pile of topsoil. But it's not back on the site. It's not there.
No.
I mean, it's this hard, fine, sandy, rocky stuff. It's not topsoil. So they didn't put the topsoil. Maybe they did, but it's not there now. Simple as that. Is 5,000 enough to compensate? Or,
No, well, yeah. The number I have in there is for doing what I'm recommending, which was to score the soil, put the cuttings on it. If we want to do something more elaborate,
No. I agree. That's what we should do. But is 5,000 enough?
Cuttings are
to do
not
that.
gonna make it grow.
It's 5. Maybe it should be 7,000 or something.
This would. I asked the engineers to give me an estimate of what it would cost to do this, and actually 5,000 was an outer limit on it. That was,
okay.
Okay. But I think given the concern about the topsoil, I don't know what the result's going to be. That's something that if the board has a recommendation for something else, then that number was wrapped around cutting the grass, scoring the soil, laying the vegetation down and watering it through the summer. with the hope that it would grow.
Well, my immediate concern is that we don't lose any more of the fine stuff to the wind. It's already pretty bad. I think something needs to be done really quick. Let me point out that this is actually the participating member agencies acting as the board on this.
Oh, we don't get to say anything?
No. Well, as you
I was just
can
gonna ask.
as a member of the public.
We'd like to invite you to join us in the project.
I
There
just
are
wanna
some
ask
small
a
things for
question.
this.
Listen,
But-
I just wanna ask a
Madam
question
Chair,
coming from the farming
Yeah,
community.
Naomi, this really is.
The public is invited to comment, of course, right?
Let's hear Rick's comments first, and then
Well,
we'll.
my first comment is, why don't we just plant pampas grass and get it over with? You know
Uh,
that's gonna happen, just get it over with, save time. I would recommend just Mr. Compromise again. If we've lost some topsoil, I'd recommend doing all the scoring, doing all the cutting, putting a little bit of topsoil on it, just to give it some more stuff to work on, then do all of this planting and the shredding, and if some other strange plants grow up, we'll just live with it. But we have to get something growing there, a little bit of something, if it's mixed, is gonna be better than what we've got now.
Yeah.
And then get the big things to pull the pampas
I'm
grass
concerned
out.
about bringing in topsoil. It's, you get whatever
But-
was in it.
But we got nothing now, is the trouble.
Well, we've got, that's, look around you, everything gets something growing on it, right? So, I mean, no, well, pampas grass is what happens when, I mean, that, yes, when you disturb the soil and the need to feed, but if we're gonna be actively managing it with mowing and such, it's not gonna get established.
The one thing I'll point out is if you look at the privately owned parcel that's between the GSD property and the preschool, that was very, very badly abused by off-roaders a few months ago. And if you go look at what's growing there, we actually walked over there to that site. It's different stuff than what's growing on the GSD property. So the majorly disturbed soil does get different plants growing in it.
Right, so the idea here is break up the soil, put the seeds on it that we want, water it, mow it, and keep at that for a while, right?
That's, to try and get back to where, to the original state. That was the thought of, you know, the biologists, and I sort of agree with that, because you're gonna repopulate. I think Rick's right, if we don't get something there, it's gonna be pampas grass, and I can go and get some estimates as to what that's gonna take. This was basically an estimate of, you know, running a piece of heavy equipment over it, mowing it, and then spreading the stuff. It's pretty simple. Is there somebody, can somebody recommend to me someone who does revegetation or would be expert at this?
Sure, Conative Nursery is renowned for this.
I'm happy to go, I mean, I don't know anything about revegetating something like this, except that if you look at it, will.
Like the Caltrans remediation site at the north end of Montero was done, they were principal consultants on that.
I'm sorry, Director, who's
Go
that?
Native, Go Native Nursery.
Go Native, okay.
And, I mean, that's one, they're in our districts, and we're very proud of them, but, I mean, they've done some really fine work. It pretty much speaks for itself. Drive by their projects and you'll see.
Would it be acceptable to the board for me to get them out there to take a look at the soil? And maybe you don't put new soil, but maybe you put some kind of fertilizer, something that.
They're the experts, and they
Yeah,
have,
okay.
they have
Whatever
taken.
they said, go
And
on.
then
They've done wetland restorations, they've done hillside revegetation. If you look at the area where they took the tunnel excavation, I think that they were the consultants on how to revegetate that hillside. And that was tunnel cuttings,
Right.
you know, so
Yeah,
that was.
I would put a lot of weight into whatever they recommend.
Okay, then I'll go talk to them and see what that number, what they think that number is to give it the best shot of revegetation and bring this back with that number in it.
I mean, they are, I'm sure there are others, but I know they are expert in the local soils and the local plants. I don't know.
It's the only name I know of, but yeah, there's probably other
My
companies.
first thought was to put sludge on it, but I didn't want tomatoes all over it, so. But why don't I do that?
It's a good idea, actually.
Why don't I go, but they're always cherry tomatoes. I'll go to them and bring this back with a quote from them with a plan from them, which I didn't bring this time.
Okay. Director Clark also pointed out, and I might have overlooked this, that two of the rings are still there around the manhole openings. You know, on some of the ones where the covers were last placed because they were back ordered, two of the construction rings are still there. Naomi, did you want to comment as a member of the public?
Well, I was just gonna suggest going to that native thing and also just putting cuttings is not gonna do it. So, just coming from them.
I mean, even Go Native could give you a, you know, I know they could do the project. I don't know what it would cost for them to do it. I have no idea. But certainly to, you know, to start by saying, hey, you know, we've got something of a plan. What do you think?
Yeah, I'd like to have somebody out there that can look at the soil and say, geez, you know,
Yeah,
this is.
they're, you know, based on their work. I mean, I can show you several different sites they've worked on.
I think we got the seeds for them, for the contractor to spread them, but that didn't solve the problem. Seeds, it's like putting seeds on a pool table.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a pretty close description.
That's good direction, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we're taking no action on this tonight.
That would be great.
All right, item 5C.
Leonard, real quick, is there a reason to wait a whole month, or can the subcommittee meet by phone or something like that? Is that legal?
We can't meet by phone, but I'm happy to come in. I mean, I'm not
I
looking for
don't
extra
wanna
meetings.
hold
but
up, you know, payments for another month, you know, they've been holding up for 6 months now.
Yeah.
We need to get something in the ground, growing.
If you can get a call this week or next week, just call us or something,
Well-
I'll just drive over and something and approve
It
it.
would have to be the 4-member board
Yeah.
meeting.
Well, okay, but the manager's got discretion on some things here, right? So what he was looking for from us tonight was the ability to close this thing out. We're not willing to close it out because of what we've seen. We've got a few questions, but I think you can bring in somebody. You don't need us to, you know, authorize that with a board action, do you?
I don't think so. In fact, I could talk to the contractor, and if the contractor's willing to take on this thing and redo his build, then I could do that and bring the whole thing back if the contractor gets involved in it and does it. I've been trying to get the contractor, you know, moved on, because,
Right.
you know, I want to get someone who's more expert than him and more concerned. If he'd been concerned enough, it might be a different
Right.
case.
Could you also check the land elevation against the manhole that's closest to the porthole pump station? Because it seemed to me it was sticking up that much higher than the dirt, and that's, let's say, a trip hazard.
Did you come in there at night with a bulldozer and a truck and take away all the topsoil? Is that what happened?
I think it blew away in the winds a few days ago. By the way, I get the idea that Sam's staff is aware of a broken manhole cover there. Not part of the wet weather flow management project, but on the other side of the stream. There's a big Caltrans orange cone. They broke a manhole, a steel manhole cover and the rim. And that's a major liability thing there. If you're not aware of it, you need to go out there like first thing tomorrow morning and see what needs to be done there, and you probably need to file a claim against Caltrans, I bet. I don't know how they broke it. They must have had some seriously heavy equipment.
They used to break it, or push them off and get dirt into the lines with their cutting
Well,
out there.
you can actually see into the line now. The manhole cover is offset in the opening because the rim, a major part of the rim is broken off.
This is on Obispo?
It's on the ocean side edge of the GSD property. It's in an easement that was there before we bought the property. And if I recall, it's like 20 feet south of the stream that is, you know, cuts across more or less opposite the porthole pump station.
I know.
Okay, moving on. Item 5C, electrical.
In April, we had an issue, a power issue in the plant. and the board directed us to go out and begin to evaluate this. We got this report a few days ago, and we're in the process of looking at it. I wanted to get it to the board early for a couple of reasons, and I don't propose any action on this. I propose that we bring this back. But what I'd like the board to do, I recommend the board to do, is to discuss it internally and discuss it with engineers and experts on your staff. Because I think what you see in this is you come back and you look at 5 alternatives ranging from, $500,000 to $1.5 million. And I think it's going to, it's not something that is clearly something you have to fix. We've had it for years. And I think it's going to be one of those difficult calls in a capital project as to whether it's a have to have, should have, nice to have kind of approach. And I wanted, this is something that I was going to have an engineer here tonight to go through it. But I think it's something that you need to have the confidence of your district engineers look at this and give you the talking points that are of most interest to your individual agency. It's a lot of money. It's not in the capital program now, so it does create something new in terms of cost into the future. We're been busily putting together a 5-year capital plan, and this pops up in the middle of it. So I think as we review this, I'd like to do this with a board that's really got some counsel, because it is a very complicated issue, and it's an issue where our discretion and our tolerance for risk is going to be tested here. So I wanted to make sure you had it tonight so your staff can look at it, and if there's any other questions we can put into the mix for the next meeting. I propose bringing this back for detailed discussion and action at the June meeting.
So the driving force for me would be the safety issue. I mean, we should. Is it true that we should have the entire project done just for the safety aspect?
Yeah, and I think the safety issue will be addressed in any one of these options. I think there's the issue of the inundation issue, given that these electrical panels are down. The first issue is, since we only had one bus bar and 2 sources of energy, when that bus bar doesn't work, neither source of energy works. Okay. And this plant, the way the system's built, is this plant, although we can shut the flow off from the north, the flow from Half Moon Bay comes in here by gravity, or most of it comes in by gravity. So if you don't have power and you can't pump, the plant slowly fills up from the bar rakes up. And if it gets into the electromotor equipment, you can have severe damage to the plant. Right. And so the idea here was to fix the issue of the 2 sources and 1 bus bar, and then there's the issue, there's a safety issue involved in that would be addressed. So safety, yes, safety will be taken care of. And then you have the issue of where could you move these, how could you move these, this new electrical system, and where could you move it where it will not be inundated by a flood, for instance. If it gets inundated by a flood, the plant dies and it fills up with water. Right. So the object here is to look and say, what's the best answer for SAM in terms of we can move it all, one of the recommendations, we move it all the way up here. The electrical connection's all the way up here, at what, $1.5 million, Tony? 1.6. 1.6 million, and it'll never flood unless we get a tsunami from, way beyond our current imagination. That being said, it is, that's one option. We can also raise it up down there. We can put it up and raise it up a little bit down there. So there's a number of options, and each one has pros and cons, and again, I don't want to have you in the situation of having to make a decision based on, a 20-minute prepared talk by the engineer who's designed this.
Do you know what the minimum change in elevation is that the engineers would recommend?
I think it varies, doesn't it, Tony?
I think they looked at different options, but I think their recommendation is all the way up over here,
So
That
that's,
gets it out of the-
what, like 12 feet higher?
roughly, yeah. And there's no place down there to just put it that high.
Yeah.
It's up here.
You know, this is really conflicting goals here. You know, on the one hand, we have to make sure we don't have a total plant failure due to the stuff being submerged, but on the other hand, it's a pretty hefty price tag.
Right, and that's why I'm not showing up next month with a dog and pony show and a, what do you think, directors? That's why I think this, again, it's not like our effluent line fell off and we've gotta put a new, you gotta do X. This is, you should do this, and then where does the should stop? We haven't had a problem in 30 years of operation, but we've had, you know, it's now been called to our attention, and we're looking at it, and so that's why I don't think it's an easy call because of its cost, and because it's a low probability of failure, but a catastrophic failure if it fails.
How bad was it in 95, 96 storms? Naomi? Tony?
We have pictures of the water, Tony's got a picture in his office of the water rising to the berm over here. It was the creek.
Creek wasn't the thing, it was the creek.
But didn't the low end of the plant flood in the 95, 96 storms?
If it did, it was very minor.
Yeah, it was more the creek.
It wasn't from a power failure or anything like that, it's just, we got more water than we could pump at the time.
Right, that was a lot of rain.
Yeah.
Could, when you bring it back to the board, could you get the consultant to maybe split it up into discrete pieces where we could pick the highest risk piece and do that one year and then take the next highest risk piece and do that in another year? Because it doesn't sound to me like this has to be done as a unitary thing, that it could be broken up into at least 2 or 3 or 4 pieces, I think.
Well, we'll talk to them about that, see what they can do. I think, you know, some of it is, if you start up here, for instance, you gotta move the services up here, the power services, you gotta move the generator up here, and once you do that, then that's a lot of the bulk of it. But I will ask them about that, how we could, if they could break these down into incremental approaches, multi-year projects that will get us to a goal over a number of years.
And, you know, it might be that the first thing you do is move the generator, for example. Because without the generator, we're in big trouble, you know, no matter what else happens. Director Harvey pointed out this sheet here. I hope this is an old sheet and not current. And the reason I'm saying that is because, speaking as one director here, I don't want Carollo to have anything to do with this plant ever again.
It's the plant drawing set that we have that people work from. rather
So
than
this is a file thing and not any current
Right.
Carollo involved.
Carollo is, we don't have any business with Carollo.
All right.
It's been a while.
Wally Bishop was an engineer? Oh my goodness. Whoa. He's been going a long time.
Anything else on this item for tonight?
No. I just, again, I'd like, if you're willing to send it on to your engineers so that you get the best possible number of questions and concerns ironed out.
Okay, I think we can do that. We can certainly discuss it. The GSD meeting this month was put off for a week, so it's actually this Thursday instead of last Thursday. And we have a more or less permanent, regular business agenda item of discussing what's going on at SAM. It's been elevated above directors' reports. So we can certainly discuss this under that item. Okay, item 6A, new business, adopt resolution, next number and sequence of resolution preparing and reporting the value of employer-paid member contributions. My head started spinning and my eyes crossed when I was trying to understand this.
Both we might take 6 items, A and B together. These are boilerplate that we have to change with CalPERS because of the MOU with Local 39 that because we're changing the contribution that we're making on their behalf from 7 to 5%, we have to formally adopt that and let them know that we're doing that, and that's what these documents are. Jeanette, you got these these are boilerplate off the internet for them, right?
Yes, they
Okay.
are.
And so this is just pro forma stuff that needs to happen so we can contribute to CalPERS per their rules.
So what you're saying is we have no choice but to pass these resolutions?
You have the choice of whether or not to pass them, but CalPERS
Could review
prefers
them
that you pass them.
In order for us to implement the change, yes.
Okay, then maybe you need to briefly describe specifically what change that is.
Well, currently SAM pays 7% of the employee's share of contributions towards their pension. And per the MOU that was ratified on April 22nd, that's going to change effective July 1 to 5%. It will be reduced to 5%. So
Okay.
SAM's contribution will be 5%, and the employee's contribution will be 2%. And in order to make that
That's
change,
complying with the state law that took effect January 1st?
The MOU.
our MOU.
Well, I think the MOU has to comply with the state law.
Mm.
Yeah, the state said employer can no longer pay it the full employee contribution, and it's being ratcheted down over about 7 years.
To 2018.
Yeah.
This is just based on our agreement with we could do it in 2017. We are going incrementally at it through the MOU.
Okay. Any further questions of staff or else a motion? Can we have one motion to adopt both resolutions?
I would so move.
I'll second it.
So moved and seconded that we adopt the resolutions for 6A and 6B. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 8-0. Both resolutions are approved. Item 6C, designate labor negotiator for the purpose of negotiation with the general manager. I requested that this item be put on the agenda because the first draft agenda that I received had only the session item for conference on a labor negotiator, and in order to do that, you have to first appoint the labor negotiator in open session. And the draft had named a particular person as the labor negotiator, but the board never appointed that person. That was done, I think, in the original negotiations for hiring the general manager. So we can either decide to appoint a labor negotiator now, or agree that the board will act as a committee of the whole. What would be the pleasure of the board?
And just a question, who drafted the original contract? GM contract?
I don't remember.
Best I can figure out, it came from your labor attorney.
The one that sent the memo, Suzanne
Yeah.
Price? Okay.
Now, I can't say that, I could go back in my file, and try to figure out where it started from. I got that far back, and I don't know where she started.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, do we want to?
Can I just, before I finish, that there were amendments to that, Director Alfano, so that it was a progressive document. The last amendments with relate to that section 4 that you guys have been discussing came from your head hunter, Reagan Williams, and the manager.
Are there any timing issues that would require us to do one or the other?
Yes, well, one or the other.
I mean, if we hire a negotiator, will that, appoint a negotiator, is that going to make the process longer? Are there any critical dates coming up that have to be met?
Yeah,
We have
there
to-
is this,
Do we have to get back as a board to approve something?
July, June 1st, right?
June 3rd.
June 3rd.
Yeah.
We have to notify Steve that whether people are not going to renew or make a new contract.
I'm a little confused, if there is a time limit. But I'm confused, do we, whose decision was it to hire or to designate a labor negotiator?
Well, I had that agenda item added because the original agenda had only the closed session item for conference with labor negotiator, and my knowledge is that to do that, you first have to appoint a labor negotiator in an open session. Now, if we don't feel that we need an outside labor negotiator, I'm suggesting somewhat strongly that we don't, then we just skip this agenda item.
This item, or what about the closed session?
Well, and I guess we would also skip 10A potentially.
Well, the board has been acting as the labor negotiator, I suggest we continue that.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
All right, so we're taking no action on item 6C. Item 7, manager's
As a
report.
point of clarification, and this is what you and I discussed, Mr. Chairman, so your action is that the board will act as a negotiator.
Right. Okay, item 7,
Just for clarification, in closed session, if we make a decision and we require somebody to write something up in terms of a contract, can we can't really make that decision in closed session, we're gonna have to be out in open session? I mean, if you're gonna have somebody do an updated contract, where do we make that decision?
I would think you'd probably end up making that in your closed session.
Yeah, I
Because-
would
okay.
It's just
think
salary,
so.
you can't talk
Just to
about
take
it.
that one,
You can make a decision and close, you have to personnel, salary has to be discussed.
Yeah, a specific salary amount has to be done in an open session
Right.
based on what
Whatever
was
you
decided in
come,
closed
yeah.
session.
right, and just, if I, Mr. Chairman, if I could just comment back to Director Alfano. If during the closed session, you decide that the board shouldn't be the negotiator, that you want somebody to come and negotiate, I would make that decision and then report it out at the end of the closed session.
That's what I was curious about, okay.
So procedurally, that would effectively be reconvening the open session, picking up item 6C again, taking action on it.
But you may not
moving back to
decide that
closed.
tonight, it may be the next, after you get into your discussions, and later on that you would come back.
Okay. And we move on to item 7. Item 7, manager's report.
I don't have anything to report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Item 8, attorney's report.
Nothing, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Item 9, director's reports. Hearing none, we will adjourn to closed session for the items as listed on the agenda. I was informed a long time ago that if I refer to it as that, I actually have to